How to get to Illinois?
Yeah, from Texas.
My parents moved. So my parents are teachers, and they moved from Texas to Missouri to Illinois when I was a senior in high school.
Ah,
And then I just, got a job here after college.
nice,
This is where I've been.
nice.
Hey, so while everybody starts to join right now, feel free to drop into chat what city and state you're calling in from.
Well, I'm in Algonquin, Illinois.
So Tim, you're in a new city and a new state.
I am. It seems like, I'm just bouncing around right now. I guess that kind of happens with the area. Was living in Kentucky, work in Indiana, now I live in Ohio. Born and raised in Ohio, moved to Pennsylvania, moved back here. Got Mary from Indiana.
Nice.
Got Rachel from Cincinnati. She said, "Go Bengals." I don't know about that. After this weekend, they might be the Bungles again.
What's Penn State doing, Tim? How are they going to do?
They got a tough schedule. They got 6 ranked opponents that they got to play this year. So, but they started off the season pretty well. Beat 2 of them already.
Nice.
So I think they're ranked 6th after this weekend. Of course, being in the area, we battle with the Notre Dames, the Indianas, Ohio States, Cincinnati's. So Purdue, yep. So a lot of Cincinnati Bearcats are wondering how Penn State's ranked in front of them, and they continue to win.
They play Notre Dame this year, correct?
They do at Notre Dame, so that'll be a good one.
Wow.
We got John from Indiana as well. Welcome, John.
I wonder, is Mark and his crew on? Can you tell, Tim?
They are not yet.
Okay.
Look at getting started here in a couple minutes. Wait for a couple more people to hop on here. Actually, Tim, while we're waiting, you got a big event that you're headed out for tomorrow in Nashville, correct?
I got 2 big events. So my daughter is up for Musician of the Year for the AMA in Nashville. So that will be tomorrow night. And then Saturday is our mountain bike festival out at for sale. So busy week.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Tim, so how does the rain that you're currently getting affect your mountain bike trail event this weekend?
As long as it stops, as long as there's leaves on the trees, then it'll suck up the water out of the trail. So as long as the rain stops, we'll be okay within a day or so. So
Okay.
when the leaves are off the tree, they quit taking up the water out. So it just sort of sits there then.
How long of a route is it?
Right now we have 22 miles in our it's a loop, and we're going to build 7 or 8 more miles next year. So that'll be pretty much it. We can't really maintain much more than that. It's gorgeous though. You can't believe you're in southeastern Indiana when you're riding our trails. This is where the glacier stops. So we still have a lot of hills and a lot of topography, which is really just gorgeous. And you start getting away just a few miles away from here, it becomes flat pretty quick.
Shannon and Tim, if you guys are ready, we'll go ahead and get started here.
Yeah, sure.
So we got a nice little webinar in front of us today. So Shannon, thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about the top 5 casting source articles. So before we get started though, real quick, what I want to do is if anybody has any questions during the webinar, we like to try and answer those live. If you could put them in the questions section here in the GoToWebinar, and we'll try to get them answered as the slides actually are talked about and actually happen. We like to have that interaction. So again, if you have questions, make sure you're dropping them in there as soon as you have them. And if we need to as well, we can go back to them. If the questions are not able to be answered during the webinar, let's say something pops in your head down the line, we'll try to get everything answered at the end here as well. But don't worry if there's any outstanding questions left, we'll be sure to reach out to you guys and get them answered. With that, I'd love to introduce our 2 guests for today. So a lot of you surely recognize Tim Weber. He is our repeat host here. And what we're going to do is, Tim, having his experience that he's had brings a lot to the table with 36 years in experience. And we will additionally call on Shannon here. So Shannon, I have to ask, so tell us about the snake that you have.
Hey guys. It's actually my daughter's, my 12-year-old daughter's. She really wanted a snake when she was 5 or 6 and had been asking for one for a whole year, and then happened to run into someone in a pet store who was walking around with a ball python. And so she, got to hold it and everything, and so she really dug it. So for Christmas she got Pete the snake. That was
Pete
about
the
6
snake?
years ago.
Yes.
It's the easiest pet we have. It just kind of chills in the tank.
Okay. So, similar to Tim, Shannon brings about 16 years in American Foundry Society experience. She's got a great background in the casting industry. She is the current managing editor for Modern Casting and Casting Source. So really, really great publication out there. If you get a chance, check it out. And, from there, we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, and Shannon's just an encyclopedia of foundry knowledge. And the other thing is she's just incredibly curious. So this is going to be a good one. I think this is going to be one that we're going to look back on. So looking forward to it. So Shannon, can you talk a little bit about the casting source?
Yes, so this magazine is about casting and engineering casting, purchasing castings. So it's really geared toward people who are perhaps buying parts that would be cast, or maybe they are designing parts that would be cast for like an end use that they are working on. So it's there to help figure out, how to have a good relationship with a foundry or your casting supplier. Design tips that might be specific to a casting. We go through all the different kinds of processes because, metal casting is not really just the one thing, right? You know that there's so many different types of processes and alloys, so it's not like a one and done, okay, I know everything now, because it's really very unique to the application and to the foundry itself. So we're just there to kind of help guide people and making some good decisions and answering some questions that they have to help them do their job better.
It's really chock full of content. Is your target market designers and engineers, that type of a profile?
Yes, yeah.
Seems like when I go through it, I'm just thinking every time there's like something new, and I'm like, I hadn't even thought about that question. What kind of?
We try to do a little bit of, kind of come at it a number of different ways. We'll have some, some more technical stuff that's maybe about some new research going on, mixed in with some really like 101 information for someone who might be new to either engineering or new to engineering for casting. And then we like to have a lot of real world examples with case studies. And then we really have some strong columnists who are experts in the industry who are kind of giving their advice, as someone who has, been doing this for, 25, 30 years.
Yeah, just real quick, is Casting Source, is that like a new, that seems like, is that like a new brand? Is it a different look?
Yeah, well, gosh, it's been probably 4 years, 5 years now, but it used to be Metal Casting Design and Purchasing.
That's right. That's right. I
And
remember. That. Well, cool. Well, let's jump into some of Shannon's top articles we discussed, and we'll go to the first one here if we can. And you might want to talk about how we picked these out. That's another thing. Maybe just kind of walk through some of your criteria for coming up with these articles.
Sure. And I didn't pick all of them all for the same reasons. This one I picked because, I just kind of was curious and looked through our website to see which article had the most hits, the most views. And this one popped up, the 8 factors affecting lead time. To me, it makes sense because I think it's something that people are running into quite a bit with their projects, is just, when can I expect to get my part, or when I'm doing my planning, what's the schedule supposed to look like. So 8 factors affecting lead time is really one that people seem to be searching and then revisiting over and over again. And I think it kind of gives some really just real straightforward points as to what you can expect and why you can expect a certain amount of time to take for a casting to be delivered.
I mean, the 3 bullet points you got here that we started out with are spot on, because again, you got to have a completely cooked design before you can start into the tooling. So working with the engineers and figuring out, what's castable and what needs to be done in a secondary. We talk about this all the time. We do castings every day, all day long, 6 days a week. And a lot of our customers, they do it once in a while, or the engineer may be project, this is the first time they've brought a casting to a project, or not that often. So, these questions are the same thing we run into all the time. So that's spot on.
I want to make a quick point here.
One of my favorite quotes.
Go ahead, Shane.
Go ahead. I was just
So
one
just
of my. So I like one of the quotes from this article. I think kind of tells it from like the foundry point of view, that the lead time for your casting suppliers, and this is from George Boyd, who was president of Golden's Foundry, and he said it's not a function of time to manufacture, it's the certainty of facility availability. So basically, this article kind of shows how a foundry is like making their schedule, and so you can see why, how you can fit into that schedule, or why maybe you're not a good fit for that foundry because you don't fit their best parameters for operation.
It's the number one thing we've run into this year at the industrial shows that we've done is schedule. I mean, that's the number one thing, what is lead time? So that and the second one, I guess, would be is material a factor. But you're right, the number one thing everybody's bringing up, it's the hottest topic is schedule right now. Let's go to number 2. You got, I'm sorry.
Question came about here, and I think it's good to mention. So Shannon's talking about her top 5 articles, but a question came across: can you access these articles online, and are they still available? I think before you answer that, Shannon, the top 5 that she's talking about here, you'll see at the bottom there, it is linked directly to that article. And when we send out this PowerPoint deck to everybody following the webinar today, it will be available, and you will be able to directly link to the articles that she's talking about. So in a general sense, though, Shannon, they're asking if old articles are available still online somewhere.
Yes, back to like 2012, we have our articles up and the digital editions are up. So please visit the website, check it out. Hopefully in the follow-up email with the slide deck, we can also send a link to, if you want to subscribe, you can either get the print version or you can sign up for the email version. So your preference, but then you can start getting them in the coming future issues as well. But yeah, we have a nice archive there on the website.
Nice.
Then another question about the lead time. I think you both were hitting on it. This is a very timely, event for sure. You get on LinkedIn or any of the social media and you're looking at business, posts. I think everybody's talking about, whether there's stuff stuck in the ports in LA or down in Charleston, or in just even material availability. From a high level, or does this break down a specific foundry or industry? Whether it's die casting, or is it kind of a general broad scope of how to kind of plan for lead time?
So this specific article is just a broad scope. We've run other articles also about lead time that might be more specific to a process. Also, this article is, I think, maybe 4 or 5 years old. We did do another one about lead time, I think, last year. So might have a little bit, hits a little bit more of the current points. This article really has, the time tested, general things to remember, no matter what kind of era you're in.
Yeah, great. It sounds like it's doing, similar to the type of information we're trying to put out on these webinars. Really become, that expert. And we try to do it for our type of industry. And I understand, from your chair, you guys are really trying to get after the main scope of all castings, and really capture all different markets there. So that's
Right.
great, and that really helps out a multitude of different industries. So it's nice to see.
Yeah. Just, I don't want to get this too far out, but I don't want this to be a commercial. But Shannon's the editor of the magazines, but the American Foundry Society has got just a boatload of information. And when we bring in a new engineer, or we bring in a new salesperson, or a new, production manager of some kind, we go through all their courses. And it's all right there, and so easy to do. And if you haven't, you should check out their website and see what's available through them, because we take advantage of it. And we've been doing this is our 75th year. We know a thing or two, and we go there all the time. Let's go number 2, casting cost considerations.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
It's very similar to the lead time article. Again, a nice list of some things that will affect what the cost is. And it's good to know these things, because you can kind of think, well, maybe I don't need to specify this nice of a surface finish, for instance. If I don't really need it, and I'm just doing it because, the part before it that I was working on had the same surface finish, kind of, you can think, maybe I don't need X if I know it's going to affect the final piece price that I'm really trying to, whittle down.
Yeah, and these are, again, the top 5 here with, the geometric complexity, dimensional tolerances. Can it be as cast? Can we actually hold those tolerances, or do they need to be a secondary machine? Surface finish and the aesthetics. It seems like everything's getting tighter and tighter. Everybody wants a part that not only performs but looks good. And that's a direction I think we're all seeing in all different areas of foundry work, and different industries, and different, like you mentioned earlier, alloys. And then again, the quality requirements. What do we need to meet? Is this a certain industry that's got certain specs? And certification of those specs, and then also qualifying the materials. Does the materials come in certified? Is the heat treat certified? Those type of things. Right. And then, you got packaging is 5. It's no good if it doesn't get there. If it doesn't get there in good shape, you can do all the above and show up, and it's a fail. So these 5 are actually the top 5 for us also.
Hey, Tim, good question that came across. So you'd had done a previous webinar on the 10 things to look out for when designing a permanent mold casting. Is there any one specific that you could pick out that really, coincides with the 10 casting cost considerations?
The one thing is just to know what you need up front and know what you know and know what you don't know. Okay, so we could pick out one individual thing, but if the engineer or the designer can just get whether it's us or another foundry involved as early up front as they can, a lot of the problems can be addressed, and that includes the cost. You don't want to get to the end of the day and all of a sudden the tolerance is too tight and it can't be cast, and you got to throw a machining operation in, or you've got to throw some polishing into an area that you thought was a B or C surface, and in actuality, it's right in front of the customer's face. So, getting the requirements up front to whichever foundry, whichever process you're using, I think is key to 100% of the casting cost considerations.
And then go ahead, Shannon.
To also think about, your the secondary operations. So if you can have the machining people perhaps talk to, foundry if you're not in the same spot, because
Right.
there's things that you can do as the casting side of things to make the machining easier or less extensive.
Absolutely. How do you hold it? Where are you picking up the datums? Those things need to be determined up front before you start making parts. And absolutely, the machine shop, wherever it is, needs to be pulled in, as well as if it's powder coated or painted, or if there's some assembly. All those folks, as early as you can get them involved, you're going to save that. It's worth its weight as far as the casting cost, but also just the lead time. It really shortens things up.
Tim, you're almost propping me up for a great follow-up question there. So a question was asked about post-casting assembly. Will a foundry consider final assembly beyond casting prior to packaging? So when, a customer comes in with a project, is it often seen that a foundry will work with that customer to really understand the final assembly that product's going into prior to packaging, so that they can receive it in, ready to assemble, ready to get their unit out into the market?
For sure. Our experience is that, where does that assembly come in? Does it get assembled at the foundry? Is that possible? Can it be assembled or partially assembled in the machine shop? Or is the assembly done after maybe a powder coat or paint operation? So, where does it make the most sense? The other thing is that we talked about cost. If you're moving parts around a lot, if you're packaging them up, getting them from one facility to the other facility, that doesn't seem to be that cost effective. So taking those things into consideration, I think foundries will for sure look at what can they do, what can they capture in-house to add value and to solve problems for their customers. So yeah, it's a good question.
Do all foundries do that?
I think they all will look at it. I think some of the foundries are more set up for it. There are production foundries that, all they want to do is make a casting, and that's what they're really good at, and they don't want to stray from that. And there's other foundries that are a little more, versatile. So that's a great question. I think that it comes down to the individual part, the individual foundry for sure.
Great. And then Shannon had a question. It was kind of a combination of the previous, your number one article on lead times, and in consideration with the costs that we're looking at here. Are casting costs affected by the current market and longer lead times? Are you seeing that as a trend right now, or are you seeing that in the research that you're doing?
I can't answer that. We don't talk very much specifics about actual cost. I do know it's been difficult, not necessarily, I've heard that there's some difficulty in getting the metal materials, but also there's some chemicals that are used in certain casting processes that are, in short supply. It's not quite driving up the cost, but it probably could in the next few months.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we had this discussion yesterday. We're looking at the next quarter's cost of aluminum. And, you know, I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen aluminum at this price ever. And, you know, I think we're lucky that we've got no shortage. We've got a good supplier, and it's all North American. It's all, it's all good. But man, the cost is just outrageous. I mean, it's crazy. Tim, what was the number we were talking about? I mean, increase from like just last year.
Yeah, I mean, aluminum tends to follow the copper markets. Not really having the specifics in front of me, but you know, a lot of the stuff goes back to the supply and demand, availability. You know, what we're hearing from a lot of our suppliers are that aluminum's available, but because of some of the squeezes in different countries, you know, it's becoming you know, higher in price. But you're seeing that across every metal. You know, again, it follows copper. Copper's you know, still really high. Steel is still really high. I think lumber's came back down, but it's still really high for what it is traditionally. So you're seeing a lot across a lot of different materials. You're seeing it in plastics. Shannon mentioned chemicals. So, you know, it's not just one commodity, I guess, for lack of a better term. You're seeing it across the board here.
Yeah, we're seeing it. Go ahead.
Sorry, I would bet for many foundries, if not most foundries, labor is your largest, going to be your more significant cost than any material, and that's also in short supply right now.
It sure is. That's a good point.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about 3D printing. How old is this article, Shannon?
Oh, let's see. I just had it pulled up. 2017.
Okay.
We do a lot of articles on 3D printing and additive manufacturing. And this is nothing like super groundbreaking, this specific process that we're looking at. But I liked this because the people who are, you know, quoted in the article, one of them, Marshall Miller, he's a buyer of castings, and he really just tells his peers or his, you know, foundry suppliers to just try it, you know, especially something like this 3D printing of tooling, which is like a very low cost entry point. And here this article is talking about using it to just print some patterns that you might just need for one or two parts. And since this 3D printing is becoming more of a mature process, the cost to try it out is becoming lower and lower. And so Marshall is really just telling you folks to just try it out, see what you can do with it. It's not going to be the answer to everything. It's a, you know, one tool in your toolbox. But this is kind of neat because it's for if you just need the one replacement part, or maybe you have an existing pattern that just needs one little adjustment for one part. So then you can just print and insert, and that without having to create a whole new pattern or destroying an existing pattern that you then would have to remake, because tooling is very expensive in the casting realm, as you guys I'm sure know.
All right, I gotta tell you a story here. Tim knows about this. We talked about the bike shop. I have a small neighborhood bike shop, and a fellow came in and he brought in 4 or 5 prototypes that he had done in 3D printing, and asked us to try them out. And we tried them out, and we came back with some recommendations. He came back and he changed them. And again, he was doing the modeling. He had 3 3D printers, just some sharp ideas. And he was 12 years old. It was very impressive. I think the 3D printing it's here to stay, but I think the other part of it is the guys who can make the model. I think that's a critical part of it. You know, yes. That's I think is as important as the machine.
Tim, I think, you know, just a comment from my end, it's been pretty interesting just how it's shifting the industry. So Shannon, you made a point on it's not going to solve everything, but from my experience in permanent mold casting, we're limited on what we can do from a prototype sense. Now with 3D printing and 3D printing coming about, we now have solutions to be able to offer some type of prototyping help. Now we're still a production shop, but there's areas we can help direct customers to, or in different relationships to help build that product to get it to a production type state. Again, on the previous question, ready to assemble, ready to put in that customer's product, ready to get out in the market. So I think it's interesting to see how that shift has been made within even the permanent mold industry. But I think the different types of capabilities that it's allowed across all casting industries is pretty cool.
Yeah, and the equipment's gotten faster. The equipment's gotten cheaper. The materials, the variety of what you can print is just amazing. I mean, it just keeps getting faster and better all the time. I think it's a great tool.
All right, I like this article. We do, because it's really kind of, I think it's the bread and butter of what Casting Source does, and that's take a real world example of a cast part, and we talk to the people who engineered it and cast it, and kind of go through the story of the part from beginning to end. This particular piece was originally just a fabrication, and it was re-engineered to be a cast part, and end up saving them, the company, money. And I think it's really cool too, because the guy who worked on this part for Bezler Industries, he was new to the job. He was like 2 weeks in to the job, and his boss is like, we need this to be cheaper. And so he never had worked on a casting before, but he connected with the foundry that the companies used before, and they worked with him on getting a cast design version for it, and he ended up being a hero for his company that day.
Yeah, I think that's a path that a lot of folks in the foundry industry see, where they take a fabrication and move it in towards a casting. I think I mean, we see it a lot. We've talked about that in some of our other podcasts about some of the projects that we've done. I think that's a really organic path to follow. Very similar. So we talked about this product a lot. This was another one similar to what you just talked about, Shannon, where we had the customer brought to us a similar type of thing, and the engineers just said, this is a 12 pieces. Can we get this? I've got one right here, but we've talked about it before. But same type of thing. Can we get this into a single casting? So it worked out well, and it ended up being a permanent mold, and it ended up being a very good volume. And they saved, I think they paid the tooling off in like 2 months. It was ridiculous. The amount of labor, the amount of SKUs that they had. That's the other thing, purchasing people, they don't want to have all these different SKUs that go together. I mean, managing 12 SKUs in a schedule for one part, that's a nightmare. So if you can do what you just discussed with the iron conversion, if you can do that in aluminum or bronze or steel, it makes a lot of sense. Again, that's one of those things. I think if you can get the foundry involved early on, that's the place to do it.
Sometimes I feel like a broken record in my editorial because I talk about that a lot, but I think it's just so important because every part is different, and different foundries have different strengths and capabilities. So that communication can really save headaches and money.
Yeah. And the other thing, the foundries communicate with each other, and typically if something comes in that's not good for them, they're not going to take it on. They're going to, the majority of founders are going to say, hey, go to this direction or talk to these guys or look at this process or whatever. So, I mean, everybody wants it to be successful. We want to win as many jobs as we can, but we're not going to take on jobs that, are better placed in another process and another material. So talking to the founders talk all the time. So you take advantage of that. Again, I would echo what you just mentioned about just the communication up front, how critical that is.
Yeah, I think, Tim, that's a good point. Every casting that's designed, I know there's some copycat stuff out there for sure, but every casting that's designed is essentially a custom piece. So Paul had asked that question earlier on post casting assembly. A lot of the good foundries will get that stuff in and really help that person walk through how to make that product manufacturable. And it's really cool to see that type of stuff converted into what I'm going to show here on the next slide, and a lot of stuff that goes out into the marketplace that a lot of common eyes may not notice or may not know that are there, but serve a great purpose in the marketplace. So can you guys talk about kind of the city savings in different projects that you see out in the marketplace that really, I guess, in a lack of a better term, help give back to the community in a way?
Yeah, this article is from, obviously after Hurricane Katrina, they needed to rebuild the levees and new pump stations, and so a lot of these are huge castings that were used in the new pump station, so that they're keeping the water come out of the city of New Orleans. And it was, we just had Hurricane Ida, which wasn't, I think the duration wasn't as long, but the pump station definitely did its job, and that it's just a really cool example of the importance of castings to just everyday life, and just kind of a really cool application. I know you guys work on a ton as well at Batesville that you see, in the wild, as I like to say.
It's funny where you see castings. I mean, they're everywhere, and this is a great article. I went back and checked this article out because these are massive. These are big parts. You read the article and you come away with all kinds of questions like how did they move that around? Because you've got a mold that's twice as big as those castings. And then you got to get the metal into that mold, and you have to do it in a homogeneous manner so you're not causing turbulence, and you still need good parts, right? But
yeah,
they're big parts. So it was very, very cool. That was great.
Just the sheer amount of time that it takes for it to solidify. These molds are sitting there for days as the metal is getting, cool enough to remove from the mold.
It's a wild article. It was really good. Nice.
Tim, I think you got one sitting on the desk in front of you too about something that kind of gives back into the
oh yeah, this was a cool part. This is one of our customers in up in the East Coast, and what they do is they make equipment for rehabilitation for kids. So first of all, everything's a candy color, right? And then you have the application where it has to, not only fabricate or look, function well, but it has to look good, and it can't cause harm. It has to be smooth. And it was like, okay, this was a cool project, and it just entailed all the things we were just talking about. It has to function. It has to look good. It performs a great service to the society. And when you see the items and they talk through it, it's like, huh, that makes all the sense in the world, how they go about it. So pretty cool project we got involved with.
I love the difference too in sizes of the two castings we just talked about.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. And even on these, we have a variety of sizes because, kids are kids, and you start out and they're this big and then they get to be this big. So then they still have the same needs as far as, when they're injured and they've got to, go through the process of rehabilitation and therapy. So, you know, I just thought the whole thing was just so clever, the way they put it all together. It was a neat project to be involved with.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to see the casting, but I think the candy colors on this for sure make them pop. So.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, so as we get to the end here, there was a final question this is for Shannon. Are there any upcoming articles that we should look out for that you're excited about?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm excited. We actually just went into the issue that's being mailed now, but we had an interesting conversation because we're always trying to get the next generation of manufacturers. So it's kind of not super casting technical, but it was talking with a high school teacher who has a manufacturing program that he has been working with local manufacturers and some foundries and it's like, I think there's 6 different classes that he's taking within manufacturing. Um, you know, foundry is one of the I guess lessons. But he's getting a lot of support from the local manufacturers, and he's getting a lot of I think enthusiasm from the students. He's got like 65 who are enrolled now and in the courses, and they go from in one example there was he's just 16, so he can't necessarily do a lot of the foundry work, but he's there. He works at a foundry in what he can do, but once he hits 18, he's got a good job that's got a career path for him that maybe is not necessarily via college or another route. So that's kind of an interesting piece. And then we talk a lot about tooling in the September-October issue, which not as maybe exciting, but a lot more informative.
Nice. Yeah, that's always a tough question on tooling. Getting back to the schooling, I think probably a good time to shout out on Manufacturing Week. Our machine shop foreman, he actually came through here as a high schooler, and now and years later he's our machine shop foreman. And the Manufacturing Week is coming up here pretty soon, and we do something similar. It's not as much as a complete class, but we do a walkthrough. I think we've got 60 kids signed up so far, but I urge other manufacturers, especially foundries, you know, folks go to machine shops a lot more often than they go to a foundry. It's kind of interesting, and I think it really gets a point across when they can actually see metal being poured. Pretty cool.
It's cool, but it's also can be techy. You know, we talked earlier, Tim, that you've got, robots and cobots that you're working on, some automated pouring potentially. So it kind of scratches that itch, I think, too.
It does. It's a good point. Really good point.
I think it's misunderstood a lot, and I think it was actually talked about last week at a AFS executive summit. There's a lot of technology that goes into the casting industry nowadays that is, you hear casting and you just expect it's dark, dirty, hot, but there's a lot of technology that's out there now being used in foundries and being used in machine shops. So getting a lot of these high school students out into the foundry and the machine shop to see the stuff going on. Shannon hit on some of the stuff that you're working on, Tim, with the robot polishing, robot pouring, robot sawing, a lot of the different stuff that goes into that and the technology that goes into that. So
yeah, it keeps you competitive, and it's just great to be a manufacturer in the United States. We can compete with anybody. We've got as good, if not better, technology than everybody else in the world has, and this kind of stuff keeps us at the forefront. So it's fun to be in that place where we're making parts made in America.
Absolutely. And with that, Shannon, I appreciate your time today. Tim Weber, you as well. As mentioned earlier, all of the slides will go out following, and a recording will go out following this webinar today. If any questions did go unanswered, I know there were a couple in there that I tried to respond to. We will make sure to get those answered offline. And if there's any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks
Ed.
for having me.